guidelines about like introduction and why introduction and conclusion are important. Why?
At the start, and like you have the introduction is important because it's what grabs people's attention.
Yeah.
And then the conclusion is important because that's like the last thing that probably like they're gonna remember probably.
Yes, like the introduction can definitely like grab your audience like attention for sure. And any other people like any other idea about why introduction is important? Yes, yes. And James, do you have anything to say why introduction is important?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with what Luke said. I try to start with like story or question or something like that people like actually have to answer, pay attention to. Because no one really cares if you just start spitting out information.
So yeah, introduction serve to frame the speech and give it a clearly defined beginning, and also like conclusion give a like clearly defined ending. And it helps the audience to see what's to come in the speech and then let them mentally prepare for the ending. And also, um, introduction and conclusion provide a preview and review of your speech as a means to re-emphasize to your audience what you are talking about. However, there is much more that a speaker must do in the introduction and conclusion than just preview or review the topic and main points. But also the introduction and conclusion are not the main parts of your speech, so they need to be relatively short and to the point. And the general rule is that the introduction and conclusion should each be about 10% of your total speech, and leaving 80% for the body section, which means like if you are presenting a 5-minute speech, so the introduction and conclusion probably just gonna be like 30 seconds each. And if you are presenting a 10-minute speech, so the introduction and conclusion should be like 1 minute each. And besides the length of the introduction, there are some common errors to avoid in introduction when you're building an introduction for a speech. Rambling, not getting to the point, or like choosing a technique that hurts credibility, or ending words. Like I really want to ask you to remember, like you can say like, oh, I'm not sure if like it is what it is, or like I don't remember certain terms, but just avoid saying like, oh, I'm not sure, or like I don't remember in introduction part, because like if you said it in introduction part, how your audience gonna believe what you are saying like in the rest of your speech? And it's those kind of words like not sure, don't remember, really show the audience like you are not well prepared. And um, and also beginning to talk as you approach to the platform or lecture. Instead, it is preferable to reach your destination, pause, smile, and then begin. Just show your audience that, okay, like I'm going to present, instead of just like hitting them like with your introduction. Does that make sense? Or like you can ask any questions, like any questions or whatever. And reading your introduction from your notes. Instead, it is vital to establish eye contact in the introduction, which means you can, I mean, I'm not saying like you can't read your notes, because I know it's hard to memorize all the stuff for your speech, but also just avoid like reading your notes, reading the introduction part. Just try to make as much as like eye contact with your audience in the introduction part. Does that make sense? And also like avoiding like talking too fast in the introduction part. Do you guys know why though?
If you have like, I guess if you have, I don't know, an accent or you have a deep like tone or something like that, like people just aren't used to listening to that, so you might say your words differently. Like if you're from a different part of the country, like I know some people say like mountain versus mountain, for example, and they might not be, they might just get caught on something you said, and then they might miss everything else you're talking about.
Yeah, true. And any other idea about why you shouldn't be talking too fast in, especially in introduction part?
I think, talking too fast is bad because it forces people to really try to pay attention to what you're saying versus if you're speaking slowly and you're emphasizing, they're able to just naturally listen.
Yeah, it's really hard for your audience to like pay attention to you if you talk too fast, like they can't absorb like information that fast. Does that make sense? And any other like thoughts, like any other things you want to say about why you shouldn't be talking too fast in introduction part? No. And also, so back to the oh, how many like minutes should I leave for the introduction and conclusion part? Speaking about that, you really should write the introduction or the conclusion after you have a clear sense of the body of your presentation. Otherwise, you have to like fix your introduction every time, like just make sure the introduction is like good fit and also covers like all the main points. Does that make sense? And the challenge of building an introduction is that there is a lot you need to cover in that 10% of the speech time. And all of it is vital to establish yourself as a knowledgeable and credible speaker. And there are 5 basic elements that you will want to incorporate into your introduction. Can you guys guess what are those 5 elements are?
Attention grabber.
Attention grabber? Yes.
Preview your main points.
Yes, preview and what else?
Credibility.
Yeah, credibility and what else?
Thesis.
Yes, thesis. So the first part is getting the audience's attention. So the first major purposes of an introduction is to gain your audience's attention and make them interested in what you have to say. And while many audiences may be polite or not talk while you are speaking, actually getting them to listen to what you are saying is a completely different challenge. It's just like this class, like I'm like giving you guys information, but how can I know if you are actually listening to like processing what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So it's like, yeah. And if you do not get the audience's attention at the outset, it will only become more difficult to do so as you continue speaking. Does that make sense? It's like if you can grab the audience attention at the first time, like at the first place, it's really hard for you to grab their attention like later on in your speech, in the rest of your speech. Does that make sense? Or like you have any other like different thoughts or whatever?
I have an example that comes to mind. I brought it up when I was doing a TED Talk speech, but because I did my TED Talk on my professor, my math professor.
Yeah.
So he and I had talked about it, and when I was looking at his speech is 16 minutes long. At the very beginning, he started with like a piece of history or whatever, and he was talking about Russia launching Sputnik and all this, and he kind of sped through it a little bit. So he said Sputnik in 1957, and then he said something about Kennedy being president and launching, all this stuff, and going into the space program and whatnot, but he didn't like specify that he was progressing in time. People thought that he was saying that it all happened in 1957 and Kennedy wasn't president then. And so there were a few people that commented on that online. They were like, oh, like this guy must not even know what he had 15 minutes of really good content and 1 minute of this introduction that he was doing that he messed up on, and they missed the last 15 minutes of good content just because he sped through the introduction a little bit. So that's kind of interesting.
Oh, got it. Thanks for sharing, Hero. And other people ending like other examples. And also it reminded me of like how you guys suggested me like moving the impromptu speech to the beginning part. It's like attention grabber, I would say, I don't know, but yeah. And any other thoughts? No. And also that's why every speech should start with an attention getter. Sometimes these are called grabbers. Starting a speech with like, hey everybody, I'm going to talk to you today about soccer already sounds like super like boring and has not tried to engage the individuals in the audience who doesn't care about soccer. It's just like me asking you guys like, oh, do you guys watch sports? Like, oh, I'm a big fan of like basketball or whatever. But like some of you like who like, I mean, for some of you like you guys really don't care about sports. Like how like I'm not engaging you guys. Does it make sense? No. You guys are like, oh, why she's like talking about basketball every day then? Oh my god, that was funny. And when you try to figure out what can be a grabber like or like attention getter, you want to make sure that the option you choose is actually appropriate and relevant to your specific audience. So different audiences will have different backgrounds and knowledge. So you should use your audience analysis to determine whether specific information you plan on using would be appropriate for a specific audience. So, can you guys tell me what does like audience analysis mean?
Knowing the demographic you're talking to.
Yes, and well, just like using our class as an example, like how can you analyze the audience like today's class? First of all, they are all college students. And second, we are all in Alaska. So just think about like that point more like, oh, the common, like the things we have in common. Does that make sense? And the second element, just like James said, like, yeah, establish your credibility. It's really important. When you are informing, persuading, or entertaining an audience, one of the things they will be expecting is for you to know what you are talking about as the speaker. The second element of an introduction is to let your audience know that you are a knowledgeable and credible source for this information. To do this, you will need to explain how you know what you know about your topic. So it's like, for example, if I feel, yeah, it's like if I'm, for example, well, I know you guys don't like sports, but I can't think of any example, like other example. I say, okay, I'm a volleyball player, but now today I'm going to teach you how to play soccer. Do you guys think I'm like credible, like enough? Okay. Oh wow, thank you. Yeah, it's just really important to show your audience how much you know about this topic, like how it's like James like speech about like math, like his major, like tell us about your major and show us like, oh, you are probably like we can trust what you are saying in the rest of your speech. Does that make sense? And also about Jaden, he's from Basel, right? Yeah, and when he was talking about like go fishing, like in Alaska, I mean at his home, it's like, yeah, he's credible enough to teach us like how to fish or how he fish like at his house, like home, I would say. Okay. Does it make sense or not?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. And the third part is establish rapport. I can't pronounce this word right. Like it's like report, right?
Yeah.
Report. Okay.
Um,
So report. And at first time I saw this, it's like report. I'm like, oh, no, it's not. It didn't sound right, but okay. And it is basically a relationship or connection you make with your audience. And in everyday life, we say that two people have a rapport when they get along really well and are good friends. And in your introduction, you will want to explain to your audience why you are giving them this information and why it is important to them. And you will be making a connection through this shared information and explaining to them how it will benefit them. Does that make sense? Like show your audience like why they should listening to you and make the connection between your topic, between your speech to your audience. Does that make sense or no? John's like, oh my god, I'm so tired, but I have to. Yeah. um, and you as a speaker must determine what you think will work best and help make a connection. So it is like, first you have to analyze your audience, like, oh, they're all college students and they're all in Alaska. And then like try to just make a connection better after analyzing your audience very well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like there's two different like scenarios too for this. 'Cause
Uh-huh.
like if you're in a place where everybody wants to be there, like you're talking to, like you're at a conference full of doctors, and you're a doctor yourself, and you're speaking to a bunch of people that they're not forced to be there, you know. Whereas like if you go to like a third grade classroom, it's much harder to get them to listen to you because they really don't want to be there. And they really don't care.
That's true. And it's really like depends on the situation, like the reason why your audience are there that day, like for your speech. Does that make sense?
For the third graders.
Oh my gosh. And also, here is kind of an example about how to throw a baseball. And maybe you choose to focus on for example, you are giving a speech about how to throw a baseball. And maybe you choose to focus on the age of your audience and noting that they are all relatively young and that some of them are already like parents. You might say, oh, a lot of people in this room have or may have children someday. And if you decide you want to throw a ball with them or help them with sports, here are 3 steps you can use to teach them how to throw a baseball. But will everyone in the class have kids someday? Probably not. But it is reasonable to guess that most about your audience will relate to this approach based on a demographic analysis. Does that make sense? Or like if no, or like not at all? And the element 4 is just like preview your topic, like purpose and central idea. And also like a good introduction should make the topic, purpose, and central idea clear. But what is central idea statement? Any of you remember what is central idea statement? No one remember? Okay, it's okay. We will review all like what's central idea statement, what's general purpose statement, and what's like specific purpose statement at the end of this class. Okay, well, right now, I guess. So, and like whoever can answer the questions, like you will get like 2 extra points. So First, what a general purpose of a speech can be. General purpose.
Educate the audience.
Mm,
Is that like persuade or?
Well, I guess it depends on like what kind of speech, like if you're doing like informative or persuasive and argumentative.
yeah, and who else said persuasive or whatever?
That was the answer.
Okay, John, what did you say?
I said persuade, but you could just go with mislead the public.
Okay, and Casey, do you have like,
Oh, no, the same thing.
okay, just persuade?
Or inform, or entertain.
And Luke, what are you gonna say?
It's the same thing.
Okay, so yeah. So so a general, like a speech should have like probably like one of those three purposes, general purposes, which is like, did I provide? Yeah, to inform, to persuade, or entertain. I really hope you guys remember this. Like, even though our exam, like our final is not about like an exam, but like I still hope like you can be able to remember these three general purposes that you like barely remember, even it's like week 11 or week 12. And next question is, what's the specific purpose statement of the speech?
It's like what the speaker will accomplish. Your specific purpose statement is developing your speech after you know what your general purpose is.
Yeah, it's kind of like, but I remember last time I asked this question, you said the same thing. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, and anyone else want to answer this question? Have like, it should cover like three elements. That's a nice guess for real. And anyone else?
Who your audience is, what you are trying to convey, and I don't know what the third one.
Yeah, your audience. So the first audience is like the second element. So the first one should be like the communicative verb, like verb for your general purpose of the speech, which means like, oh, to inform or to like persuade or to entertain. And the second element, who's your audience? So to inform my audience, my classmates, and then the topic. Does that make sense? Will you be able to remember if I ask you this question next week?
I think it's weird that it's called specific purpose statement, but like you wouldn't actually say it like that in a speech. You wouldn't
Yeah.
do that. So
Yeah,
that's,
yeah, yeah.
That's the reason I don't, like, I understand if you say like specific purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but like I would never tell the audience who my audience is.
And why though? Why though?
I mean, because they know, like, if my audience is college students, my intro should appeal to them immediately because it's about college students. I shouldn't have to say like, if this should appeal to you because you're college students.
Yes.
So I
And
can
also,
tell you did all three of those.
yeah, and just like when you're building the outline for your speech, just remember to like, oh, what's the purpose of your speech and who you're going to present and what's your topic. Does that make sense? And also if you directly say this, like, oh, I'm here to inform my audience, like my college, like my classmates about whatever, it really sounds kind of like boring. Does that make sense? Okay. And last question, what is a thesis? It should be easier than the last two questions. What is a thesis?
3 main points of what you're going to be talking about.
Yes, all the main points. So like cover like just like cover all the main points, but like also like summarize them, like, and also when we talk about like how to build a thesis, what is a good thesis be like how it looks. Usually it's like 3 to 5 sentences. Just, yeah, I just hope you remember that. And back to our 5 elements in introduction. For most speeches, the central idea and the preview should come at the end of the introduction. And the last one is also like just like preview your main points. Just like previewing your topic, previewing your main points helps your audience know what to expect throughout the course of your speech and prepares them to listen. And your preview of main points should be clear and easy to follow so that there is no question in your audience mind like what they are. And what these 5 elements do is prepare your audience for the body section of your speech by letting them know what they can expect and why they should listen to you and why they can trust you as a speaker. Oh, so do you guys remember what are those 5 elements we have talked about?
The attention getter.
What else?
Main points.
Main points, what else?
Building rapport.
Oh, sorry, what did you say?
Building rapport.
Yeah, yes. And what else? Someone said something?
Credibility.
Yeah, and what else? I feel like this one and this one is kind of like similar. So like main points, preview your topic and preview your main points. They're kind of like same thing. Not same thing, but like similar. And I really hope you can like including all these 5 elements in your next like persuasive speech for real. And okay, here is an example about like how to, it's a good, really good introduction. And does anyone want to read this part? This like introduction? Okay, James.
My parents knew that something was really wrong when my mom received a call from my home economics teacher saying that she needed to get to school immediately and pick me up. This was all because of an allergy, something that everyone in this room is either vaguely or extremely familiar with. Allergies affect a large number of people, and 3 very common allergies include pet and animal allergies, seasonal allergies, and food allergies. All 3 of these allergies take control over certain areas of my life, as all 3 types affect me starting when I was just a kid and continuing today. That is the attention getter.
Yeah, and this is a really good attention getter. It's kind of like telling giving your audience a background and like just kind of a narrative story, a short like narrative story to grab their attention. And does anyone want to read the credibility part? Casey?
Because of this, I have done extensive research on the subject and would like to share some of what I've learned with all of you today.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you've done like research, so like we can trust what you are saying because you've done research. And anyone wants to read the like report part? Luke.
Whether you just finished your freshman year of college, you're a new parent, or you have kids that are growing out of the house, allergies most likely affect everyone in the room at some point.
Yeah, this is like building a report, and anyone wants to read the last part? James.
So it will benefit you all to know more about them, specifically the 3 most common types of allergies and the most recent approaches to treating them.
Yeah, and it is a really good, like well, like done, super like good, like introduction. And does it give you any like idea like how you gonna build the introduction for your next speech, or no? It's kind of like the kind of outline, like first, what's my attention getter gonna be? And credibility, how can I show my audience like I'm like credible enough to talk about this topic? And then build like report. And then like, oh, the purpose and what's the main point that I'm going to talk about in the rest of my speech. Does that make sense? Especially our next speech, our next two speeches, they're gonna be persuasive speech. So I would say building credibility is really, really important. Otherwise, your audience, like, well, even if they are listening to you, but like they will not like, you are not like, you will not like persuading, like persuade, what's that word? Persuading them. Does that make sense? So building credibility. And the next example, I know it's like way too long, but can you, okay, I just want to give you probably like 3 minutes to read through this, the whole like paragraph, like introduction. And this introduction is really good, a good introduction for a persuasive speech. And I want you guys to identify what's attention getter and what's credibility part and what's like report part and what's like preview topic and main points part. Josh, do you want to come up, see if you can see back there?
No.
Oh, okay. And let me know you finish reading. Good, all good. Okay, so what's the attention getter part? Where is the attention getter part?
The local dot
The
at the beginning.
the beginning to where?
Say the financial burden.
Financial burden.
Okay, I just want to highlight this one. And what's credibility part?
Is it one from, I have learned a lot about life insurance in my research, and then still.
Yes. And what's credibility and the report part? Like report is like, I hate using report, just like where's the like making connection part, making connection to,
In between the two, where most of us would not choose. I was gonna say before that, in between the intro and, because then she's kind of tying, she's grouping them in as us together, so she's kind of grouping herself into the audience.
and I would say this part is kind of building relationship too. Do you guys agree or no? And where is the like preview of topics and the topic and the main points?
The last part.
This one
So,
is- And do you think it's a really good introduction or no?
yeah,
Yeah, and it is really just like a really good example about like a persuasive speech, for like good example for a persuasive speech. And I really hope like next time, or probably not next week, but like a week after, you can like think about, oh, in my introduction for my persuasive speech, I need to cover like, oh, think about like my attention getter, credibility, and making connection with your audience and also like preview of the main points. Does that make sense? Okay. And do you guys have any questions? Or like what have you learned today, or like you didn't learn anything today?
Refresher of general purpose statement. General purpose and specific purpose statement.
Okay. And John, what are you gonna say?
Did you write that?
No, I didn't. Yeah, if I, it's gonna take probably 2 hours for me to write a good like introduction for the speech. Any questions? Like you guys really learned something today or no? Do you guys think this class is boring, or you can just say so for real, like I can think of like any other idea to like kind of like better engage you guys and like make this class more fun. Does that make sense? I mean, for real.
I mean, it's kind of what you make of it too, just like we present, so it's kind of up to us to take advantage of the practice and the opportunity to do it. It's not like you get a lot of practice before you get thrown up in a situation where people are criticizing you. So you have that right away.
Okay, and also starting next week, we are gonna, because I know that like in our past impromptu speeches, like they were about like, oh, just giving information, talking about what you're gonna say. But starting next week, we are gonna do more like persuasive impromptu speech. So just convincing your audience about like your side. Does that make sense? Yeah. And if you don't have any questions, I will see you next Tuesday and have a good weekend.